Now, as you know, many people who do monologues and jokes and so on, they have somebody out here with a little tripod and the idiot boards, you know, on which the jokes and the script is written. Well, Bishop Sheen had an angel. I can't afford that. And I have nobody for an idiot board. I'd have to squint to see it. So what I've done, I've made my own. And I'm going to check these things off as I tell them. But what I would like to open up with is a story that originally was at the very front end of the old Chalk Talk. Well, it's a government film, and for their own reasons, they cut it out, but I think it is a gem. I opened up by saying that we human beings have an absolute genius for making mistakes. We're good at it. And 99% of the mistakes we make are caused by ignorance rather than knowledge. It isn't what we know, it's what we don't know that causes the error in judgment. Now, some mistakes they're just funny. One time, a nun was going to confession, and she tripped and stumbled and fell going into the confessional. What was unknown? The priest was ignorant of the fact that it was a nun. He heard somebody fall, and so he was concerned. He said, "What's wrong out there?" He said, "Oh, excuse me, Father, I'm so nervous." He said, "Why?" She said, "My children. They taught the second grade. They were killing her." He said, "How many children do you have?" She said, 52. And he said, "Get the hell out of here. I thought you were drunk when you fell in." No harm done. Now, some mistakes are very painful, and I believe that these are the kind that we can learn from if we're willing. And this is the way the Chalk Talk opened, with this story about an old Oriental patriarch who became quite irate one afternoon over the fact somebody had tossed his outhouse over the hill. Now, he had two sons. One was 8, one was 9. Typical mischievous kids. Called them in. He said to them, he said, "You know who threw a Papa Son our house over hill?" They didn't know. So he sat them down. He said, "Would like to tell you a story of American boy named George Washington who one day chopping down a Papa San Washington cherry tree. Papa San Washington called him in, asked him if he know about cherry tree, and George said, 'Papa San, no can tell right. It was I who chopping down you cherry tree.' Papa San Washington pat him on the head, give him cookie. The 9-year-old, big grin, jumps up and makes the grand announcement. He says, 'Papa San, it was I who threw your our house over hill.' The old man nearly killed him. When the kid came to, he asked his father the obvious. He said, 'Papa San, for why you tell story of virtue get reward? George Washington tell Tlu get cookie, I tell Tlu get whipping.' The old man told him why. He said, 'There only one difference. When George Washington chopped down a Papa San Washington cherry tree, Papa San Washington not in cherry tree.' Big difference. No. Now, this is what appearance can do. This is a British story. There were two fellas born right next door to each other, brilliant, absolutely brilliant, and they were great rivals from form school on up, through their secondary education, through college, through university, and everything else. One went to Oxford, one went to Cambridge. One year, one would be a quarter of a point above the other, and that's the way they went. Now, right after they got out of university, one joined the British Navy, one entered the Anglican Church. And of course, with their gigantic abilities, each, in time, as the years went by, rose to the top. So that one of them became the Lord High Admiral of the British Navy, and the other became Archbishop of Canterbury. In the meantime, The military man remained militarily slim, like a pencil, and he was so decorated, you could hardly see the blue of his uniform for the gold of the medals. The archbishop, however, had grown not only in grace and wisdom and age, but also in girth before God and man. He had this huge front on him, like this. Now, as years went by, they didn't see each other from the time they got out of school until they met 30 years later in a train station in London. All right? In the meantime, every Christmas, each would send the other a Christmas card signed with the latest advancement after the name, underlined. They were still rivals. Well, it so happened that the archbishop in the station spotted the admiral first. And he went up to him and he tapped him on the shoulder, and when the fellow turned around, he recognized his old buddy immediately, but before he could say anything, the archbishop said, "Porter, would you put my bag on that train over there?" And the admiral recovered enough to look at this man in the flowing red cassock with this huge front, and he said, "Madam, in your condition, you shouldn't be traveling at all." There was this British fellow, the British are great for dog racing, the greyhounds and so on. And this one fellow told a friend of his, he said, "I have the fastest dog in the entire world." He said, "He is so fast, I can hardly clock him." Now he said, "I haven't entered him in any race so that not a soul knows about him but me, and now you. But because you're my best buddy," he says, "sell everything you own, hock everything you can hock, borrow every dime you can borrow, even steal if you have to, and put it all on this dog." He said, "I've entered him in the most prestigious, wealthiest race in England." He said, "He has only one slight defect. He is so fast that as he rounds turns, he just kind of veers to the left. His speed makes him veer to the left." No problem. They both bet everything they could. When that dog bolted out of the gate, he shot around and lapped the field in such speed that there was an audible gasp from all of the people, there. And he just, and wider and wider and wider. He's on the last lap of the race. And he veered so wide, he banged into the fence, knocked himself unconscious, didn't even finish. The two of them are stone broke. And his buddy comes up to him and he says, "I don't know what to say." He said, "I've made you lose everything." And the fellow looked at him and he said, "No sweat, really." He said, "I've made it and I've lost it many times." He said, "I'll make it again. Don't worry." But he said, "I've been thinking since the end of that race, I think I know how to get that dog from veering to the left." He said, "How? Tell me." He said, "Just put some lead in his right ear." "How do I do that?" He said, "With the biggest shotgun you can get." It was a little tiny hamlet out in Ireland, and they were having a typical Irish wake. Now, there were no funeral parlors. The body was laid out in the home. And in this case, they had him stretched across the kitchen table with a sheet over him and so on. And a couple of people were keeping the vigil out there when two legs of the table began to give way, and they caught it. And he said, one of the neighbors, he said, "Well, I think I know how to fix this." He said, "We'll remove the table and we'll stick a chair under his neck and a chair under his ankle, and then we'll put a chair under his waist." He said, "Now wait here." And he went in the living room where they were all sitting around drinking. He said, "By the way," he said, "can you let me have 3 chairs for the corpse?" They said, "Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray!" That same fellow, his grandmother was on the street, and she said to a fellow from Kerry, she says, "Can you see me across the street?" He said, "Wait, I'll cross and let you know." Postman over in Ireland was delivering letters, and he came to the yard of this woman, had this huge dog there beside her. And he says, "Does your dog bite?" She said, "No, not at all." So he opens the gate and walks in the yard, and the dog almost chewed his leg off. He said, "I thought you said your dog doesn't bite." She said, "Mine doesn't. That ain't my dog." This Irishman went up to his parish priest. He says, "Father, all my life," he said, "I've had this lovely dog." He said, "He died at the age of 18. And he said, I know it may sound strange, but I want him to have a Christian burial. And the priest says, you got to be joking, Murphy. He says, we can't have a Christian burial for a dog. Well, he says, do you think the Presbyterian minister down the road will? Well, he says he might. And he says, do you think O'Rourke, the undertaker, would handle things? Oh, he says, I'm sure. Now, he says, Father, do you think $60,000 would be enough of an offering? Oh, for God's sake, bring him down to the church. He said, I didn't know he was a Catholic dog. So, I'm told that the Irish, when asked any kind of a question, will give you an answer. Ask for directions, and they may not know where the place is that you're asking, but they'll give you directions. And this fellow was in Dublin, and he walked up to this fellow, and he said, could you direct me to Doolan's Hotel? He said, well, of course. Go down to the end of the street and make a right. And he said, when you come to the stoplight, he says, make another right. And he said, when you get down the following street, make a right. He said, that'll wind me up right here. He said, of course it will. There's Doolan's across the street. There's an Irishman was a security guard at a museum. And inside is this huge skeleton of a dinosaur. Now, most of you who are mothers of youngsters know that dinosaurs are the in thing now. And he went up to, a visitor went up to the Irishman there, and he looked at this skeleton. He said, gosh, that must go back ages. He said, how old is that thing? He said, 8 million years and 7 months. He said, how can it be so accurate down to the month? Well, he said he was 8 million years ago when I came to work here, and that was 7 months ago. There's an American of Irish extraction. He had come over as a young man. And, of course, we have marvelous, wonderful medical centers here. And he learned of a youth pill. You know, one of them will set you back 25, 50 years, whatever. And he sent some home to his parents. So a couple of years later, he went back to Ireland. And he got off the airplane. And here is this absolutely gorgeous young creature, seemed like almost half his own age, waiting in the airport with a baby carriage and a little infant in it. And she walked up to him, called him by name. He said, yes, that's me. He said, who are you? She said, who am I? I'm your mother. He said, Ma, you're kidding. No, she said, I took a youth pill that you sent over. And then he really got worried. He says, the baby, Ma. Where'd the baby come from? He says, that's no baby, that's your father. He took 2. This priest was walking by a pub one night after hours, and he looked in. There were 3 of his parishioners in there drinking. And he went in, he said, I'm kind of ashamed of you. He said, O'Rourke, do you want to go to heaven? Oh, yes, Father. He said, stand over there. Shaughnessy, how about you? You want to go to heaven? He said, of course, Father. He said, stand over there. Murphy, he said, do you want to go to heaven? No, Father. Murphy, do you mean to tell me when you die you don't want to go to heaven? Oh, he says, when I die, yes, I thought you was leaving now. I'm sure they do strange things in Tennessee, but this fellow was driving along the street and had a friend with him, visiting from New York. And they come to this stoplight, and the thing is red, and the fellow drove right through it. And a New York friend didn't say a word. He thought, well. They went through another red light, and he said, hey, pal, you just went through 2 red lights. He said, yeah, I know. That's the way my dad taught my brother and me how to drive. Come to a green light, and he screeches to a halt. He said, are you nuts? The light's green. He said, I know, but my brother may be out driving the other way. You know, some of the funniest stories of all are about Britishers. One night in an old English club after dinner, there were 4 very old British gents sipping their after-dinner brandies. And after about an hour and a quarter of complete silence, one of those old fellows figured it was about time that they introduced themselves to each other. And he said, hey, Brigadier General, retired, married, 2 sons, doctors. And the other three went, oh. 38 minutes later, the second old man said, Brigadier General, retired, married, 2 sons, they're barristers. Oh, he said. 19 minutes later, the third old man said, Brigadier General, I am retired and married, 2 sons, members of Parliament. And the fourth old man spoke up immediately. Sergeant Major, retired, unmarried, 2 sons, Brigadier Generals. Fell aboard the other fellow's car, and when he came back, he said, geez, thanks for the use of your car, but he said, I got a little water in the carburetor. Oh, I said, we can take care of that. Where is he? He said, in the river. Fella come back to one of his buddies from the hospital. He had just been examined, and he looked very sad. I said, what's wrong with you? He said, geez, the doctor told me I have this illness. And he said, I have to take a pill a day for the rest of my life. Well, he said, there's nothing wrong with that. He said, you can take a pill a day for the rest of your life. Why are you so sad? He said, he only gave me 4 of them. Pat was dying. Mike went to see him. He said, Michael, I'm not long for here. I says, I'll be gone. And within a couple of days, I'll be buried in the churchyard right across the road there. Now, I said, you and I have been friends all our lives. And he said, we used to be great drinking buddies, and every afternoon we'd drop into Flanagan's pub, and we'd have a couple of good bangs. Now, he said, I'm going to ask you to do me a favor. He said, in memory of the good times, would you mind when you come home from work every day, he says, drop into the pub, have your drinks, and then get a good double shot of Irish whiskey and bring it over and pour it on my grave. And Mike is thinking, great Scott, what a waste of good booze. I hope to live to be 100, and he wants me to do this every day, a double shot of Irish whiskey. God help us, how can I do that? And yet this is a promise to a dying man. And then it hit him. Patrick, I'd be happy to do that every single afternoon of my life, in memory of the good times. I'll have me drinks, and then I'll come over to the gravesite, and I'll pour a double shot of good Irish whiskey over your grave. But would you mind, Pat, if I strained it through my kidneys?